For those of you who are, is it early childhood, elementary, secondary, or special ed, any middle, secondary? Possibly. Okay, and then if you're not teacher ed, why are you taking this course?
Policy studies.
Policy studies.
I too am policy studies.
Okay, awesome. Everybody? Environmental, awesome. Okay, just like to kind of gauge who my audience is. Well, I'm Erin Hone. I teach in the elementary ed program here at Elon, and my focus is in elementary math. So I'm just going to tell you real quick about number stories and what they are as we celebrate Pi Day a few days late today. But how many of you have heard of number stories? You probably have, and you just didn't know what they were called, that they actually had a name, number stories. Really, it's just kind of common sense for what we should be doing with kids who are soon going to be adults in our world, trying to make sense of problems and solve them. So, number stories illustrate how math is used to solve problems in real-world situations. Bless you. Which seems, like I said, like common sense. Well, isn't that just what math problem solving is? We're just making sense of situations and solving them, solving the problems that arise. So, for example, this starts in the very little ages, the young ages. So even, I was talking to my 5-year-old this morning, and we just, talk through, like, if there were we were talking about 4-leaf clovers, actually, yesterday. And I was like, well, if you had 2 4-leaf clovers and 2 3-leaf clovers, which would have more leaves, the 4-leaf clovers or the 3-leaf clovers, and so we were just talking through that. And so that's what it looks like in the younger grades, where you're just talking, or you're showing them pictures, or you're modeling it with situations, or they're acting it out. When they get into kindergarten, then you just want to talk through contextual situations. So in this case, there were 4 fish in a pond, then 3 more fish came, now there are 7 fish altogether. So again, it's just getting them acclimated to, in this case, addition and what addition is without actually calling it addition. Another example, and of course this is the children that are making these stories up. There were 4 dogs at the meadow, 1 ran away, now there are 3 dogs, and then they start to realize that, oh, we can put operations with those numbers and with those objects, and then we have subtraction. So it seems like common sense, right? Well, the reason that there's a big push for number stories now is because of something that we had in it used to be a best practice, keywords. And even in kindergarten, we were teaching students that if you see in all, it means add. If you see more than, it means add. So we're teaching them to look for these words. Why do you think there's a problem with that? Why do you think that's an issue? Let me go back to these stories.
You could word it multiple ways?
Yeah. There's not really any subtraction words here. What's the subtraction word? What lets us know that it's going to be subtraction? They ran away, right? So we want them to get used to just the actions of what happens when we are, what are different ways that we take things away? What are different ways that we put things together? So that they actually understand what the addition and subtraction is. So before I read to you a number story that I love, I want to show you what is the impact of teaching keywords all the way through, as opposed to stories in a context where students just learn to problem solve and to make sense of situations. This is 8th grade, okay, middle school, getting ready to be high schoolers. Here's their problem. There are 125 sheep and 5 dogs in a flock. How old is the shepherd? Should be a question mark. Okay? Think about that in your head. Let's see what happens with these 8th graders.
There are 125 sheep and 5 dogs in the flock. How old is the shepherd?
What? There are 125 sheep and 5 dogs in the flock. How old is a shepherd? I don't know how to solve this.
Why is that?
because it doesn't talk about anything about the shepherd. Like, it doesn't say how old, like how long he's had them or anything. So it doesn't give me any hints about anything. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are 125 sheep and 5 dogs in a flock. How old is the shepherd?
$120 years old.
How do you know it's 120? Can you please write down? Now, how do you know that the shepherd is 120 years old?
Then let's subtract 125 minus the 5 dogs and a flock.
Okay, thank you very much.
Obviously, they're just plugging in any operation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Actually, I don't know if I've seen multiplication, but. I'm not sure where 50 came from.
They really want to do something with this.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
really do.
Like
How did you know to divide?
Because it doesn't say the difference, or
It
it doesn't say
the
the sum,
difference, and it doesn't say
or
the
the
sum
product.
or the product,
I see.
therefore it must be
Okay,
division.
thank you very much.
That was that 8th grader's response. So 24 of them did not make sense of the problem. So this is why it's an important, and you'll learn all of this when you get into your education courses if you're going into education about the math practices and just really just want to teach our students how to make sense of things. So, Splash is one of my favorite number stories, and so I'm going to read it out loud for you, and I want you to think about how this is a better representation of what actually happens in real life as opposed to teaching keywords that may or may not be in a story, okay? Most stories that I read don't say product, sum, altogether, difference. I probably wouldn't want to be reading them if it said that in it. So as I'm reading, see if you can follow along and keep up with how many splash into the pond. Okay, splash. I have a pond in my backyard. I have 1 turtle, 2 catfish, 3 frogs, and 4 goldfish. I feed them every day. How many are in my pond? Can you tell me how many we're starting out with that are in the pond?
This might be a dumb question, but are we doing like physically in the water or like near the pond?
So the question is, how many are in the pond?
6.
6. Yes, great question actually, because my daughter, I was reading this to her, she's 7, and she told me that there were, hold on, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that right? Yeah, 10. Why did she say 10?
Because it's already listed.
Yeah, because that's how many were listed. So she just said 10. And then I said, how many, the question is, how many are in my pond? And then, of course, we had to clarify what a catfish and a goldfish is, you know, and all of that. But, of course, she wants to jump right to just adding numbers together. My cat comes home. He wakes my dog. The turtle jumps into the pond. Splash. How many are in my pond? See if you can keep up with it. So we're at how many now? 7. My cat watches the fish. My dog chases the cat. 1 frog jumps in. Splash. How many are in my pond? My cat falls in. My dog falls in. Splash, splash. How many are in my pond? 2 frogs jump in. Splash, splash. How many are in my pond? My dog and cat climb out. A dragonfly falls in. Splash. 1 frog hops out.
It's complicated.
Yep. My dog and cat climb out. which is 10. Dragonfly falls in. Frog hops out. But do you see how this helps with the actions of, are we putting together or taking out? 2 frogs hop out. My dog slips back in. How many are in my pond? I help my dog out. The dragonfly flies off. 1 frog jumps in. Splash. So,
Sorry.
8. There's Pi back there after we finish. 8. The dragonfly flies off. Was the dragonfly in the pond?
Yeah.
Okay. And 1 frog jumps in. The bird flies away. Another frog jumps in. Splash. I fall in. Splash. How many are in that pond? But what did you hear? Did you hear something in this on this page that was irrelevant?
The bird.
The bird. And I was so proud of my daughter because she was like, the bird wasn't even in the pond. You're right. So we have to look for irrelevant information. The 3rd frog jumps in. Splash. The turtle stays in. I climb out. How many are in my pond? I don't even remember what we were at this point. But what part of this would throw kids? The turtle stays in, yeah. So there's that, number that's consistent. My dog is sad. My cat is mad. I feed my fish. Everybody's where they're supposed to be. The end. So, an example of a number story that helps students to understand the actions of addition and subtraction and how they might not always have a specific word attached to them. We just want to think about what's the context of the situation, as opposed to giving them keywords that you see what happens when they get to even middle and high school. They are truly not making sense at all. So, any questions? Pete the Cat is another book that you might have seen if you've worked with kids at all. Does anybody babysit? There's an app called Bedtime Math, and I do that with my kids every single night, and I love it because it gives like a current event that's happening right now, and so it gives actual factual informational information, about something, a real event that's happening. And then it has wee ones, little ones, big ones. And so my son is 5, and I do the wee one question with him, and it's a question about the context of the information that you're given. And then my daughter, I love it because she likes to do the little ones, but then she really tries to do the big kids one, which is a little bit harder for her, but I've really realized she's able to do fractional thinking and just reasoning that I wouldn't have thought that maybe she could do if I had just thought about, this is what you're supposed to do at 2nd grade, But if they're making sense of a situation, then they actually do start to realize that they can think through those higher level math situations. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us. That's what I have for you.
Thank you.